You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. Today, some fine women are on this show. We're going to learn from Danielle Citron, a law professor, about what to do about cyberbullying and cyber hate. And we're going to have a preview, verbally at least, of a film about to debut on your local PBS station, which unearths buried history particularly affecting Latinas, but really affecting all women's rights. And last but not least, we're going to celebrate the 20th anniversary just passed of Feminist.com, the website which is the go-to place to find the women's movement, with its founder, Marianne Schnall. As I said, some fine women. But first, we need to go inside the headlines. To go inside the headlines this week involves encountering bad dads. You may remember a week or so ago I talked about new statistics that showed that close to 77% of the American public now believed it was perfectly okay for men to work at home as house husbands and raise kids. That's a step forward, but the old guard was definitely not called the old guard for no reason. Two items in today's Inside the Headlines. One, you may have noticed a story, it didn't get much coverage, about Heidi Cruz, Ted Cruz's wife, who herself has been a Goldman Sachs official and is an expert on the stock market and on finances, having had, when she moved to Texas to be with him, because she had an excellent job up north, but when she moved to Texas under family pressure, she got a little depressed, and was found one day sitting by the side of an on-off ramp of a highway with her head in her hands, unable to communicate. The family doesn't speak about this much. They just simply say, yes, well, Heidi had a period of depression, but she came through that because she found her faith and her solidity in her marriage. I, of course, immediately ask, who the hell wouldn't be depressed if you're married to Ted Cruz? Just think about that. Not to speak of the father-in-law, here's the first bad dad, that you'd inherit. Rafael Cruz, who is to blame for Ted, his father, once told a Texas Tea Party group that he wanted to send President Obama back to Kenya. That's the least of it, though. He's, remember, an evangelical minister who claimed, among other things, that gay rights advocates want to, quote, legalize pedophilia, and that if America had no abortions, it would have no national debt. I'll just pause for a second and let you economists work that one out in your mind. No abortions, no national debt. I didn't know that was so easy, nor did I know that was the reason they were against abortion. What a new revelation. Cruz also talks a lot about how his father is hyper-patriotic, how he came to the U.S. from Cuba on a student visa, and he worked his way through college, and he began, climbing up in the world and so forth. But actually, when he climbed up in the world, it was the world of Canada, not the United States, where the father had worked and become a citizen in 1973. And after Ted was born, the family came back to the United States. But Rafael did not get around to becoming an American citizen, despite his hyper-patriotism, for 30 years. Nonetheless, the fact that they were in Canada at all gives our other favorite, Donald Trump, a chance to torture Ted Cruz. It's nice for a change, because I was beginning to think only Obama was the target of birther moronic reasoning. By the way, the ignoring and underplaying of Heidi Cruz's bout with depression is particularly maddening and ironic, since Ted is one of the right-wingers who refuses to deal with gun control or any rational steps taken toward controlling the epidemic of guns in this country, with the excuse that it's really only mad folks who are the problem, and maybe there should be more money for mental health. Apparently you have to come at him with a gun, Heidi, for him to take you seriously in terms of mental health. But let's move on to the Kochs. The Koch brothers. Charles G. and David H., who it turns out that their father, Fred Koch, personally helped construct a major oil refinery in Nazi Germany that was personally approved by Adolf Hitler. This is information in a new book called Dark Money by Jane Mayer, which traces the rise of modern conservatism through the activism and most of all the money of a handful of rich donors, including the Koch brothers. And the Koch family stretches way back to the right wing. I mean, deep roots in the right, which is a mixed metaphor, forgive me. Anyway, roots in the John Birch Society. And the father, Fred C. Koch, found some of his earliest business success overseas in the years leading up to World War II. And one of such ventures was a partnership he had with the American Nazi sympathizer William Rhodes Davis, who, according to this book by Mayer, hired Koch to help build the third largest oil refinery in the Third Reich. This was a critical factory and refinery. It's an industrial cog, a critical one in Hitler's war machine. The episode, not surprisingly, is not mentioned in an online history published by Koch Industries, which was the company that Fred founded and passed on to his sons. And a spokesman for Koch Industries named Ken Spain said that company officials were declining to participate in Mayer's book. I bet. And if the content of the book, not having read it, they said, is reflective of her previous reporting on the Koch family, on Koch Industries, or on Charles and David's political involvement, we expect to have strong disagreements. And since then they have said, well, yes, but you see, the oil refinery, the Koch, Fred was only making a small widget kind of thing that helped the refinery operate. It wasn't really a big contribution to the Nazis. It was a relatively small contribution to the Nazis. Engineers have disputed whether the widget type thing was in fact large or small. But, a small contribution to the Nazis is like being a little bit pregnant. There's just no way. Mayer herself, Jane Mayer, is a staff writer at The New Yorker, and she presents the Kochs and other right-wing families as the hidden hands, like they say about the stock market, behind the growth of the modern conservative movement, particularly as philanthropists and political donors who pour hundreds of millions of dollars into think tanks and political organizations and scholarships and PACs, and they win acceptance for anti-government and anti-tax policies, all under the guise of promoting the public interest. It is quite shocking. Dark Money also contains, this is fascinating to me, revelations from a private history of the Kochs commissioned by David's twin brother, William, during a lengthy legal battle with Charles and David over control of Koch Industries. Mayer describes a sealed 1982 deposition in which William Koch recalled participating in an attempt by Charles and David to blackmail their fourth and eldest brother, Frederick, into relinquishing any claim to the family business by threatening to tell their father that he was gay. What a shocking family. What a breathtaking family history. Sounds like a fantastic book, and news we needed to have. And I think there are at least two takeaways from all this. One is the enormous, beyond imagination power of the Koch network that also provides funding to such things as, fine-tuning budget proposals from Representative Paul Ryan, such as cuts to Social Security, so they'll seem more palatable to voters. And the Kochs are so influential among conservative lawmakers that in 2011, then House Speaker John Boehner visited David Koch to ask for his help in resolving a debt ceiling stalemate. I mean, they're getting themselves into positions to take over and run the government. The other takeaway, though, is that feminists have been saying for some time, look at early childhood. Look at the role that fathers do, or rather don't, play. and that if men could do one thing to most change the landscape toward a humane and human species, it would be to parent well. These fathers are bad dads. Better news about men at the end of the program. And now for my first guest. Dr. Danielle Citron is the Lois K. Macht Research Professor and Professor of Law at the University of Maryland Francis King Carey School of Law. Her scholarship focuses on information privacy, civil rights, and administrative law, and her book, out with Harvard University Press, is called Hate Crimes in Cyberspace. This is stuff we really need to know. Professor Danielle Citron, Danielle for short, welcome to the program, Danielle.
Thanks so much for having me on.
It's a delight to have you on. You do such important and encouraging work. I am one of the feminists among many who, sometimes gnash our teeth and wring our hands about what's going on online in terms of cyber hate, sexual harassment, the general trolling, sometimes where women being the real lightning rods, getting it worse, and the more visual and visible, rather, that you are, the more you seem to provoke it. And it's vicious, and it's frightening, and it's online harassment, and it doesn't stay online sometimes. I mean, they move it offline to people's real lives, and they become cyber mobs. So, but what I love about your work is that you don't just wring your hands. You propose specific, practical, lawful ways to prevent and punish online harassment. Tell us about that.
I mean, so often I think the response to online harassment is, as you say, a kind of wringing of hands and the suggestion that, there's nothing that law can do, that we've got to just shut our computers down, ignore it, it will go away. But the fact of the matter is we have a suite of laws on the books that can be used and employed to address online harassment. And that's, of course, the civil tort system, which it's incredibly expensive to sue, and so I'm not going to put a ton of stock in the ability for most victims to be able to sue.
Right.
But we have criminal laws on the books, stalking, harassment, threat laws, and increasingly laws that address non-consensual pornography that can be brought to bear and on the sundry ways that people are using online tools to exploit people and to make sure they basically can't get jobs, that they are in fear for their lives, and that ruin their reputations. The fundamental argument of the book is that we should understand so much gendered harassment and racial harassment as civil rights violations.
Right.
Because what we're seeing is the message that the victim has no worth beyond the person's reduced to her sexuality and demeaned, shamed, and embarrassed for it, but sexually threatened and sexually humiliated, often with lies that someone has a sexually transmitted disease or is a prostitute, with privacy invasions that expose their, often nude photos next to their home address, and threats. Rape threats in particular are so common. And so we do have in some states like California civil rights laws that can be leveraged to address bias, intimidation, that interferes with one's work. But they're few and far between. So I think we have some work to do with civil rights laws that are currently on the books, state for state. And we need to do some updating with federal civil rights laws that often address sort of race-based or targeted harassment that interferes with employment, but not gender. And so we have, I think, some terrific models that we can update.
That's so
at the federal level.
That is so encouraging because it seems to me we tried this with Facebook, and that's just one aspect of things. And the way that they permitted Facebook pages that would call themselves rape rooms, rape chambers, and so forth. And I kept arguing to Sheryl Sandberg that this was creating a hostile ambience, and that creating a hostile workplace or a school place was against the law. The message that women get online is sort of a white male teenage boy saying to them, get out of my internet. This is public space, but it's my public space, and you are not welcome here.
Mm-hmm.
And that seems a civil rights issue to me.
That's right. No, when we set out to ensure that a set of people can't get a job, that they're unemployable, undateable, and that they don't have the ability to speak and engage and express themselves, all because they're a member of a protected group like gender, race, national origin, religion. I mean, that's effectively what we have civil rights. We've erected civil rights laws to prevent disenfranchisement of subordinated groups and ensure that they have all of the life chances and life opportunities that everyone else does, and that they're not denied those opportunities simply because they're a member of a group.
Okay, so Danielle, I know that you're a member of many different things, and you've consulted at the Department of Homeland Security and the National Network to End Domestic Violence. But the International Network Against Cyber Hate and other such groups, are those places where, a moment ago you said, mounting civil cases is costly, and the average survivor victim doesn't have the means. Is there such a place like a national, law center against cyber hate or something like that, where people who don't have the means could go and they would take the case?
What's really encouraging, and I know you had Professor Marianne, Frank's my colleague, on the show.
We did.
Recently. So Marianne's organization and Holly Jacobs' organization, the Cyber Civil Rights Initiative, has a sort of partner organization in the Cyber Civil Rights Legal Initiative, which is made up of lawyers from the wonderful law firm K&L Gates, who have been working on this pro bono project to help victims of online harassment and specifically revenge porn. And so, through Marianne and Holly's sort of brave work, they inspired lawyers at K&L Gates to devote their pro bono time to taking on harassment and revenge porn cases. And I think within a week of their announcing their project, so Elisa D'Amico is one of the lawyers who has been incredible. They had 100 clients basically within a week.
Wow.
Now, of course, that's just one law firm, right?
Right.
And so they're, as you say, we need more of them. We need additional law firms taking on pro bono cases, or, as you suggested, a potential nonprofit that's engaged not only perhaps even at the U.S. level, but also internationally. And I think that the work that you're doing and the program and getting the word out there about the suffering that people, experience at the hands of harassers and often sort of groups of harassers or mobs, I think will help.
Yeah, I literally know women who have been driven off the internet. Certainly off Facebook. They don't do Facebook anymore. They don't do Twitter. They don't do any social media. They sort of use email very, very nervously. And this is appalling because the internet is the tool of the future.
It's one's workplace, right, Robin? That's right. What you're doing now.
That's you're damn right.
Right.
It is the major means of communication. And this program is broadcast, but it has a larger audience
and following
online. Absolutely. And so you drive more than half the world's population off the internet. And that is the final blow from patriarchy, and we're not going to let that happen. Is there any central website that, because I know we'll be flooded with requests, where people can go to get more information?
So I would say I would have people go to the Cyber Civil Rights Initiative for really careful and comprehensive explanations of ways in which people can get involved to learn and understand about online abuse, as well as the website, which has a tremendous amount, though without my consent, which has sort of a listing of all the laws of the different 50 states that have to do with revenge porn, harassment, stalking, the ability to sue as a Jane Doe. So that has a lot of information about sort of more generally harassment laws on the books. And then
and the website is?
So that's called Without My Consent. So you've got Cyber Civil Rights Initiative, which, sort of groundbreaking work on revenge porn or non-consensual pornography, and work with legislators, as you talked to Marianne about, or Professor Frank
Yes, we did.
and you've got, right, the website of Without My Consent. And an important piece, I think, too, is, so I've been working with Attorney General of California, Kamala Harris, for the past year and a half, and as part of her work on to combat cyber exploitation, that is all the different ways network tools are used to exploit the vulnerable.
Right.
She has a website that's been rolled out and with advice from CCRI and Without My Consent. It's on the AG of California's website. It's called Cyber Exploitation. I wish I knew the precise hub. It's easy to find if you Google it. And what it does is for California, present the suite of laws that law enforcement can use to be brought to bear against online abuse. And also, it's like an education hub for both law enforcement and victims.
Excellent.
And so I'd like to see other states follow. You know, AG Harris has stepped into this issue very early on. Mm-hmm. And I'd like to see her colleagues follow suit.
You bet. So if you Google cyber exploitation California,
that AG Harris, it'll come up.
Okay,
and the other have it on hand.
And the other one is withoutmyconsent.org.
Withoutmyconsent.org.
Right.
.org. And then cybercivilrightsinitiative.org.
.org too. That's fantastic. Well, that gives them someplace to go to. Bless your heart for the work that you do and your wonderful brain. The book is called...
thank you so much for having me on.
The book is called Hate Crimes in Cyberspace with Harvard University Press. It's extremely important. Her chapter, Civil Rights in the Information Age, was featured in a book called The Offensive Internet. And it's the most popular chapter. I mean, it's really stuff you need to know. So thank you for your work, Danielle.
Thank you. And it's out on Kindle and now in paperback coming up.
Way to go. Okay.
Yay. Thank you so much.
Hate Crimes in Cyberspace, Kindle, paperback, the works. Thank you again. Take care.
Thank you so much, Robin.
And keep on doing this great work.
I promise.
It's time for a brief pause here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and I'll be right back with the director and producer of a special film about to air on PBS, Unearthing, and helping us remember a buried piece of women's history and Latina history. So stay with us.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back. My next guests, respectively, are the director and producer of a memorable film that you are about to see, hopefully, on PBS. Renee Tajima-Peña is an Academy Award-nominated filmmaker whose films include Who Killed Vincent Chin?, My America, or Honk If You Love Buddha, Labor Women, The New Americans, and others. She is now director of the Center of Ethno-Communications at UCLA, where she's a professor and holds an endowed chair in Japanese American Studies. And the producer, Virginia Espino, is a historian at the UCLA Center for Oral History Research and has done oral histories with major figures in the Latino community. Her research on coercive sterilization provided the basis for the documentary project. Here are Virginia Espino and Renee Tajima-Peña. Welcome, Renee Tajima-Peña and Virginia Espino, to the program. Welcome. This is a very special film that is about to debut on PBS in a few days. It tells the story of a landmark 1975 civil rights lawsuit, Madrigal versus Quilligan, which was basically about the right of women, particularly women of color, to have children. At the same time, we were all fighting for the right not to have an unwanted pregnancy. And I remember back in the 1970s, when I was already a young activist, that we used to march for reproductive rights, and the chant was always in one chant: free abortion on demand, which was a little bit idealistic. That hasn't come to pass. Free abortion on demand, no forced sterilization. because this was an issue on the East Coast as well, in terms of Puerto Rican women, in terms of African American women. But it's been mostly forgotten, and I'm so glad that you have, given younger women and men an eye into the immediacy of this history, particularly at the time when the Latino community is being assaulted in the United States. So welcome again, and thanks for the film.
Thank you.
Virginia, you're a historian at the UCLA Center for Oral History Research, and you are the one who did the oral histories that provided the basis for the documentary project. Am I correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And this took about 5 years, tracking down the women, doing the interviews?
Well, my oral histories originally were with the activists. When I was working on my research, my graduate research, I only focused on locating the activists who were involved. It was very difficult to find any of the plaintiffs. They had no paper trail. So it was much more complicated, and I didn't have the resources to locate them. So I used their court records and their interviews that were done with the expert witness as part of my research. It was only until we started filming that we were able to track them down and get them in front of a camera and speak to them directly.
And that can't have been easy, that part, because after so many years, it's opening up old wounds, isn't it?
It was definitely a challenge to get them to trust us and to have them open their homes and their hearts, but many of them did. It was not an easy process, but we were very careful in how we handled the situation and always open to whatever they were feeling at the moment, if they wanted to stop or if they wanted to continue. It was really guided by them.
It's lovely. And it explains why you got such great stuff. Renee, you're an Academy Award nominated filmmaker, and your films in the past on immigration and race and social issues include the absolutely brilliant Who Killed Vincent Chin and a number of others. And what drew you particularly to this subject?
Well, it's very visceral because when I first learned about the story, Virginia and I are neighbors. We live just a few miles from the hospital. Actually, I grew up in L.A. I'd never heard of the story. And when she first told me, we had babies, or they might have been babies or toddlers at the time, but very young. I had just had my first child, and we would have play dates, and she told me about her research. And I was just floored. I mean, I was in that state of bliss. I went through pregnancy and childbirth, and I thought being a mother was, this profound, I was just in that state of complete joy of having this child. So the idea that I would ever be denied having a child and giving birth and a safe and healthy birth, I mean, I couldn't imagine. So, I tend to make films when something really pisses me off, when a subject really pisses me off, and so I thought, we should really make a film about this. And Virginia had done it. Virginia, as well as just a handful of academics, predominantly Chicana academics, had really kept the story alive over the years, even though everybody else had basically forgotten about it. So So eventually we were in a position to do it.
Well, Virginia, tell some of the basics of the story. These women came to have babies, and they went home sterilized. Tell the basic story.
The Los Angeles County Hospital, that's what we called it back then, the county. It is a teaching hospital. It's a public hospital that patients who don't have the means or insurance to pay for their medical care go to. And so many of the women who were sterilized were entering the hospital for emergency deliveries. They didn't necessarily have a cesarean scheduled. They were coming to the hospital for emergency deliveries of their children, whether it be pain, bleeding, etc. So at the time that they were in labor and wanting to deliver, they were approached by medical staff about tubal ligation surgery with legal documents in hand. So the medical staff actually had the legal documents in hand, were having the women sign for their cesarean section, and at the same time talking to them about tubal ligation. So many of them didn't really understand what was being explained to them. At the time, they were under heavy medication, under duress, worried about their child. And also, there were cases where they didn't even remember these conversations.
Yeah.
So possibly they didn't happen. Possibly one woman talks about how the nurse got her hand and helped her sign the document. So there are different scenarios. Each one is different.
Sure.
But essentially they were coming to the hospital for an emergency delivery, and at that time convinced, coerced, forced into these tubal ligation surgeries.
And they were mostly Spanish speaking, and they were given English
forms.
Generally given English speaking,
right.
English language forms.
Right.
And Renee, tell about the court case and the beginning of the fight back.
Dr. Bernard Rosenfeld, who was a young intern at the time, who was maybe in his first or second year, he witnessed what was going on in the hospital. He was really appalled. He thought women were being coerced into tubal ligations, meaning tying their tubes. And so he literally sat at one of those old typewriters every day after his shift and wrote to everybody. He wrote to Helen Gurley Brown, who was the editor of Cosmopolitan. He wrote to Jesse Jackson. He wrote to journalists, to lawyers, to civil rights activists. I mean, anybody. We went through his pile of papers. It's just amazing who he contacted. But, it was pre-internet, so it was really hard to do these things. And he reached this group of young Chicano lawyers at a storefront right near the hospital on what was then Brooklyn Avenue, now Cesar Chavez Avenue. And
that's a step forward.
Yeah, yes. It was the Los Angeles Center for Law and Justice. And Charles Navarrete was 29, just out of UCLA Law School. Antonia Hernandez was 26 and had just graduated from UCLA Law School. She went on to be the president of the Mexican American Legal Defense and Education Fund, which is like the major civil rights organization of Mexican Americans. But at that time, she was just a kid who had grown up in the neighborhood, went to UCLA Law School, became a civil rights lawyer, and they took on the case. They agreed to mount a federal civil rights lawsuit, which itself, the federal courts is, it's the big time.
They took it all the way up to the court, and
they took it all the way up to the court, and watch on January 25th, and you'll see what happens in the trial. Yeah.
So again, say the name of this remarkable film and when people can see it. Very, very soon. You say it.
It's No Mas Bebes, and you can see it on Independent Lens on PBS on January 25th, 10 p.m., 9 p.m. Central. Check your local listings, however.
And this is particularly important for everybody. I was going to say for younger folks who don't know the history, but we live in a very ahistoric country in general. So a documentary like this, which is also fascinating, moving viewing, I dare you to not tear up and be inspired by the guts involved here. But it also, just for the informational value alone, is incredibly important. It's a beautiful film. Thank you, both of you, for making it. Again, No Mas Bebes on PBS, January 25th. Check your local listings for the time. You don't want to miss it. Thank you again, both of you. Thank you, Renee, and thank you, Virginia, for the work that you do. And thanks for being with us on Women's Media Center Live.
Thank you for having us.
And now it's time for the Surrealism Corner. Ooh. Well, this is surrealism that will make your teeth grind. An excellent article by Patricia Miller in religiondispatches.org tells us the following. The big nightly network news shows are more likely to turn to the Catholic hierarchy as a source for stories about contraception controversies than turn to doctors. That's according to a study reported on by Dr. Jen Guntner, Gunter, in her blog. The study, the National Network Television News Coverage of Contraception in the Era of the Affordable Care Act paper, was presented at the American Congress of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. And Dr. Elizabeth Patton and colleagues from the University of Michigan looked at the nightly news broadcasts of the three major networks for any mention of contraception in stories between January 2010 and July 2014. There were 113 segments on contraception during that period. Not surprisingly, the two most featured topics were contraceptive coverage and access, because the period covered the debate about including no-cost contraception in the Affordable Care Act. Well, government officials or political figures were the most common sources of information for stories. They were used 40% of the time, followed by members of the general public, who were used 26% of the time. Not all of them, I might add, women. The Catholic Church leaders were used as a source 18% of the time, while any type of medical professionals were used only 12% of the time, and OBGYNs specifically, wait for it, only 3% of the time. Patton said to Religious Dispatches that this isn't completely surprising since, quote, the majority of news segments about contraception focus on it as a political and social issue rather than a medical or public health issue, close quote. But then you'd think, they'd ask women, but never mind. This framing is nonetheless important, she went on, because, quote, news media often say they don't make news, they cover it, but politicians and some members of the Catholic hierarchy, I wonder who, in part drive the news coverage of contraception due to their positions objecting to the ACA mandate, she notes. And the fact that OBGYNs were so rarely used as sources of information is, to say the least, troubling, given how often Catholic bishops made false medical claims that emergency contraceptives, which were a key point of contention in the mandate, were actually, quote, abortion-inducing drugs, according to the bishops, close quote. In fact, the study found that the most common method of contraception discussed in news segments was emergency contraception, which was mentioned 1/5 of the time in the approximately 1/2 of segments that talked about any specific kind of contraception. So for Patton, it comes down to a need for balanced, that's an understatement, in the media coverage of contraception issues. I would, in fact, argue that it should only be women discussing this because it's only our bodies, but never mind. Reproductive health, she said. Reproductive health clinicians play a crucial role in counter-messaging non-medical sources of information about contraception, a viewpoint that's often left out of current coverage. There's a need for clinicians with this expertise to serve as experts, who can address the scientific evidence about the public health and sociocultural benefits, gang, of contraception. In other words, the next time the nightly news does a segment about contraception and what it does and doesn't do and who it does and doesn't benefit, possibly, just a thought here, let me run it up the flagpole and see if anybody salutes, just possibly, the nightly news segments should consider asking an actual doctor or an actual woman in addition to the Roman Catholic princes of the church. Ah! That's the sound of me going stark, raving insane. We have to take another short pause here. I'm Robin Morgan. This is Women's Media Center live, and we'll be back in a few seconds with the founder of a major institution of the current women's movement, feminist.com.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And we're back again. Marianne Schnall is the founder and executive director of the Women's Institution, major institution, and website and nonprofit organization Feminist.com. She's also a featured blogger at the Huffington Post and the author of the book Daring to Be Ourselves, Influential Women Share Insights on Courage, Happiness, and Finding Your Own Voice, and her book, What Will It Take to Make a Woman President? Conversations about Women's Leadership and Power. And here is Marianne Schnall, returning to Women's Media Center Live. Marianne, dear Marianne, family, welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Robin. I am thrilled to be here again.
Well, it's been a while. I think the last time you were on, your book, What Will It Take to Make a Woman President? Conversations about Women, Leadership, and Power, was just coming out. Wonderful book, particularly timely this year, I might point out. So, listeners, if you haven't got hold of it, What Will It Take to Make a Woman President is a terrific book. Also, your other books, which I mentioned in the introduction. But today, we want to talk about you as the founder and mother and executive director and president and energy behind Feminist.com, which is the go-to place for the women's movement in this country and to a great degree internationally. Feminist.com. And last year, it's the year we're just emerging from, it celebrated its 20th birthday. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I know I wished you congratulations during the year, but this is congratulations on having survived the year, which was filled with amazing events. Tell us about some of those events, about the 20th anniversary, and about where you go from here.
Yes, thank you so much, Robin. I know it's truly amazing to think it has been 20 years. And when I reflect back when we first launched in 1995, it was so far back that most people didn't even have home computers and didn't even know what the internet was. Netscape was the only browser. You know, it was
right.
So far back in our history that the statistics back then were that only 15% of internet users were women. And most organizations didn't even have websites. So, you know, one of our very first roles was to provide the first web presence for a variety of important women's groups that range from the Ms. Foundation to Equality Now to V-Day, Girls Inc. And it's so exciting to see the huge explosion of women's organizations and women's voices now online to be able to, you know, come from that history and to be where we are, you know, today. So I think, you know, one of the things that has been really interesting for me, having founded it way back then, has been to see how not just Feminist.com has evolved, but how feminism has evolved and how we've tried to kind of adjust accordingly. From the very beginning, I think we saw ourselves as kind of being this convener to be this sort of one-stop hub where you could find all of these feminist thought leaders and organizations in one place, which to me is a very important role to fill just because I feel like we lose energy when we operate in silos and we aren't working in collaboration with each other. So we have really kind of expanded with the times. One of the interesting things that I think that we have grown into that was sort of an unexpected turn was to do not just be an online portal, but to expand into doing in-person events. So we've been doing these salons. It started with a salon that we did at Gloria Steinem's on the state of feminism, where we brought together, you know, a panel talking about, you know, different feminist issues. We've done panels on women in peace that was hosted by Abigail Disney, where we brought together a panel of international women peacemakers. We've done 2 events on women and men as allies, which is an initiative that Feminist.com has in partnership with Michael Kimmel and the Center for the Study of Men and Masculinities. We have Our Inner Lives, Spirit, Faith, and Action, which we did in partnership with the NYU Global Center for Academic and Spiritual Life, as well as Young Voices, which was a summit that we did in partnership with Carol Gilligan. And we did this convening where we brought together professionals and activists who work on gender and youth. And actually, the Young Voices one was a new type of event for us because while the others had been sort of public events, the Young Voices event was a strategy session. It was sort of a brainstorming session where we brought together all of these, you know, professionals and organizations who work on the same issue, but from different lenses and different sort of prongs, to come together and really share information and find out how they can collaborate, and we can really move the needle around these issues. And so we did another event that was similar to that this past year, that was on the future of women's leadership, where we also brought together all different groups and thought leaders working around women's leadership to come together and talk about what we can do to sort of, advance progress.
This is so great. Every aspect of every part of this is so terrific.
Well, thank you. And I think, the big event that we did in December, which was, we've never done anything like that. We did an all-day conference to celebrate our 20-year anniversary, was really one of the most powerful events I think we've ever done. We did that in partnership with Women Action in the Media and LTW, and we had a full day of panels on topics such as Say Her Name, a spotlight on Black women and girls in the movement for Black lives.
Right.
We had What Makes a Woman, the Next Frontier of Sexuality, Identity, and Womanhood. We had one on feminist mass media, one on women's leadership. We had performances from Betty and the Arts Effect and Sarah Jones. And that we will have video from very soon. But that was, honestly, just, I think, what I hope that the work that we're doing and the events that we're doing and our website shows is how many different feminist issues there are, but how they are all interconnected, and how much more powerful it is when we make those connections, and also when we come together and work together towards those shared goals.
Yeah, I find this very exciting because obviously your online presence is huge. I mean, it's the go-to place for, to find the women's movement, and indispensable. But we all know the problem of, with certain kinds of activism, for example, where people get a statement or a petition and they add their name to it and they sort of click on it and they send reply all and they send it on and they think they've done it. And unless we've been saying for some time, and you got to take that activism onto the streets, you got to take it into the halls of legislatures where you lobby, there's a possibility of cocooning if you just simply stay online. So but this has been developing now, where whether it's the Dreamers or Black Lives Matter or lots of women's groups, feminist groups, where people, in fact, are connecting online and then taking it into the non-virtual world, otherwise known as the real world. And the cross-fertilization is so healthy and strengthening of both. And that you're now leading the field in doing that again, multiple bravissimas.
Well, thank you so much. And I think one of our hopes for the future of feminist.com and our work, which I take very seriously, is figuring out how we can do even more to really be thoughtful about everything that you said. How can we be more impactful? How can the work that we do online and off really, dramatically affect change and take advantage of, technology, but also absolutely in conjunction with, in-person meetings as well.
Yeah, there is something special about pressing the flesh, as it were, not on a rope line the way politicians do, but women really talking with each other. And laughing together. And there's a whole other language and communication dynamism online, but there's also something pretty damn special about meeting in person. And if you can manage to do both, all the better and all the more strengthening. It's just fantastic. Talk for us just a moment or two is all we have left about what will it take to make a woman president again, the book that you came out with a while ago, but which is even more timely now. You think we're going to pull it off this time, Marianne?
I don't know that I can make a prediction on that. I think there are so many, factors right now playing into what the outcome might be. But what I will say is, no matter what happens, it has been so healthy and exciting and inspiring to be where we are today, to have really 3 women running for president, because in addition to Hillary Clinton, Carly Fiorina, there's also Jill Stein running as for the Green Party.
Right.
And just to have the dialogue that we are going to be having, seeing what the media treatment will be like of these women leaders, the visual for young girls to be able to see all of these women that are running, and absolutely, if we do wind up celebrating that milestone, how exciting that will be.
Yeah, the work won't be over, but it will be at another level. So we hope. I'm not absolutely certain that Carly Fiorina knows she's a woman. She possibly she looks in the mirror and sees a male corporate pale male executive, but I always hold out hope for consciousness. And in terms of consciousness, feminist.com and the work that you've been doing for years is 20 years, more than 20 years actually, but feminist.com is now 20 years old, going on 21, and on to the next 20 years, yes?
Absolutely, and I look forward to, as always, remaining in partnership with the work that you do, and thank you for all of your pioneering work as well.
One last break here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and I will be back in just a beat or two with some fighting words.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back again to some fighting words. Sometimes fighting words can be a demand for peace. You might remember the town in Libya named Misrata. It became famous for its resistance to an 8-month siege by Gaddafi's troops during the Arab Spring uprising in 2011. And then, of course, after that high moment, the country descended into a chaos of tribal warfare. Well, now the Misrata units battling the Zintani and Warshafani brigades south of Tripoli called a halt after a particularly grueling battle that killed 58 people in just 4 hours, most of them local fighters. A Misratan city councilor said, quote, "When they saw that, they sat down and talked." Men from both sides met in a no-man's land for 3 days without telling their leaders. They sat on the bare ground, the councilor said, and hashed things out. The Misrata fighters had been told they were clearing pro-Gaddafi areas, but they found that their opponents were actually local youths fighting because they'd been forced from their homes. The youth achieved the ceasefire at Warshafana, the councilor said. It came as a surprise to us. Not that the ceasefire was accepted by everybody, of course. A senior cleric, you can always count on them, branded them traitors. And the commander of one of the little brigades, Mr. Abu Snaina, was accused by the cleric of taking bribes. Some of us, he said, were personally threatened. It was difficult at the beginning. But the ceasefire held because the young fighters were so adamant. The city councilor said, "The young fighters have certain passions and different ways of thinking." He recalled one grabbing him by the jacket and shouting, "We are not going to fight anymore." That's an element of hope. Those are fighting words we can really live by. And that's it for today. This program is syndicated, but if you can't find the broadcast on a radio station in your area, you can always visit us at WMClive.com. There you can find the show, plus the archive of all our previous episodes. And we're at iTunes worldwide. There you can stream, download, and subscribe to the show's podcast. Also, be sure to find WMC Live on Facebook and Twitter. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Opinions expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. Regina K. Scully is our founding sponsor. Julie Burton, Women's Media Center President, is executive producer. And I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us. Don't forget to join us next week right here on Women's Media Center Live.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, Tune your radio to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on WMCLive.com. Talk radio with a brain.